The number one destination for every visitor to Heidelberg is the castle. There's something magical about castles, especially a romantic ruin that sits majestically up on a hill looking out over the old town. You could easily spend several hours at this amazing destination. First built in the 13th century and then gradually expanded to house the local royalty over the next 3 centuries. Finally destroyed by an invading French army in the 1690s, and later struck by lightning that burned most of the rest of it down. But it has been renovated and restored back to its former glory, with an extreme mix of destruction and beauty that conjures up the turbulent past of this strategic fortification. Its crumbling walls and towers stand next to a complete palace with a restored interior, making this a must-see attraction in your visit to Heidelberg. From the top, you will get a fantastic view looking down on the old town. More than just beautiful, this is one of the great vistas of Europe. The castle is way up on the hill, which might present a challenge of getting up there, but fortunately, you don't have to walk up because you can ride up in a funicular. It's easy to reach the funicular from town level by
walking out the back street of Karlsplatz to the lift station. It's found in a modern building just across the street.
Don't bother trying to walk up the hill.
Take the 5-minute ride on this very efficient inclined rail car. It first opened in 1890, making this one of the oldest funiculars in Germany. It's recently been rebuilt, so now it's really a state-of-the-art machine that glides you up in smooth, quiet comfort.
The ticket you'll purchase for the funicular also gets you into the castle, and if you were to walk up the hill instead of riding the funicular, you'd still have to buy that same ticket at the same price at the top just to get into the castle. So the ride on the funicular is no extra price. That funicular ticket is also a round trip, so you can ride down on the same ticket.
For now, you get off at the Schloss Castle station, and you walk through the arched gateway and start out by walking left onto the terrace for this grand vista looking down on the town below.
And there you get the classic view looking down on the old town. You can spot some landmarks. You see the Holy Ghost Church, and of course the bridge, and the Neckar River down below. It's really like a storybook postcard come to life. Yes. Unfortunately for some bus tours, this is the only view they ever get to see of Heidelberg. A quick look at the castle, and from the castle a peek down into the old town. But in today's program, we'll show you why it's really worth spending a couple of days in Heidelberg itself with time to properly explore this beautiful castle.
You can see how the castle is built on steep cliffs to prevent invasion from the front, and with high walls and a dry moat protecting the rear. The crumbling round tower on the corner is a testament to this new age of destruction that came with those French invaders.
The terrace offers a stunning view of the town down below, and also some interesting angles on the side of the castle, the walls, the towers, the turrets, and it's a very pleasant park as well with an easy walkway. But it's curious that many visitors to the castle miss this terrace altogether because they're in such a rush and they come off the funicular and they just want to go right into the castle, so they bypass it. There's no real sign saying, hey, come out here to look at the view. But from this angle, you'll get a better perspective on the defensive fortifications, the steep walls leading down into that dry moat. And you'll also gain some views of the residential hillside behind the castle with some of the big mansions that are up there now. When you visit the castle, be sure to make time for this terrace view. Another good reason why it's worth spending 2 nights in Heidelberg on your visit. It's a city with many interesting sights, as we are showing you in our extensive series of movies about this fascinating place. It's very easy to reach this terrace view. Just simply walk through that triumphal archway. You can't miss that. You'll see on this map of the castle the route that we've taken so far Coming out of the funicular, walking over to that panorama terrace for the splendid view looking down at the town. Then we continue back through the terrace and around to the gatehouse entrance of the castle into the courtyard. We'll have a look around. There'll be some more views, interior visits, and then we'll come out again and walk over into the castle gardens. We'll show you how to get the most out of your visit.
You enter the castle through a dramatic sequence of fortified gatehouse, bridge, and gate tower. As you pass through, look up into the arch to see the massive Portcullis. It's a pointed gate that would drop down to seal the entrance. 2 drawbridges and 4 more gates completed the original barriers that kept invaders out, but these are no longer there to stop you. Once inside the castle, you'll be delighted to see the beautiful state of preservation of the main buildings. First thing you see is the huge central courtyard. As you stand here in the courtyard, surrounded by the castle, your eyes will be drawn, first of all, to the impressive Renaissance facade of the Friedrich building, dripping with sculptural and decorative architectural details. It was built from 1601 to 1607 as the living quarters for the Duke of Bavaria.
It's embellished with 16 elegant statues depicting emperors and kings of the Wittelsbach dynasty. That was the main royal family who lived in Heidelberg over the centuries. The statues are clad in a stone armor and have weapons befitting their noble warrior status.
You can find pictures of this facade in many art history books and on every postcard rack in town.
Here in the ruins of the Heidelberg Castle, you really get a feeling for the Middle Ages and the early Renaissance. The heyday of this building started about the year 1400 and continued right up through the conquest by Louis XIV in the late 1600s. And then even into the 1700s, there were noble princes and residents here. Some damage was created in the Wars of Succession that were led by Louis XIV, who blasted it with cannons. And there was further damage in a huge lightning storm in 1764, where bolts of lightning blasted into the walls of this castle and destroyed several of the towers. But today we still have the original remains. This is standing inside the ruins of Ludwig's room. And this was one of the great rulers who resided here at the Heidelberg Castle. And he was largely responsible for much of the architecture of the building that we see today.
The various stages of castle construction stand all around the courtyard. Some wings are well preserved while others are extremely damaged.
To your right is the Otto Heims building, the one that's all in ruins with empty space behind the walls. And that's considered the finest example of German Renaissance architecture in this area. The mid-16th century that was built.
It's still pretty to look at with dozens of impressive statues depicting heroes of the Bible and mythology, framed by elaborate neoclassical pilasters, cornices, moldings, and scrolls. But it's just a freestanding shell with no building behind it.
The earliest buildings here were from about 1400. It's behind you. This is the Rupert's building. The Prince-Elector Rupert, he was one of the guys who really founded this castle, and that was his main residence at that time. You can also pay to go inside the castle and tour some of the rooms.
The oldest building here in the courtyard is the old library. You can still see the Gothic windows. This dates back to the 14th and 15th centuries.
There's the well house. You have to have a well to provide water when you're in a castle in case you're besieged. The well is located in a picturesque loggia with columns and pointed arches. There's also a wine bar here at the castle. You could have a snack or a meal at that terrace restaurant, but there's a far more interesting wine experience waiting for you in the castle's basement. Be sure to visit the cellar. This is really one of the highlights of the castle because it contains the world's largest wine barrel. It was made from 120 large oak trees, and it had a capacity of 275,000 bottles of wine. How big is it? It's so big there's a wooden staircase you can climb to reach a viewing platform on the top, a level area that was constructed to have dance parties. Then you keep walking alongside the barrel and you'll come to a very steep spiral wooden staircase. Hang on to that wooden railing because it's a narrow, curved flight of steps back down to floor level. They say there was a network of pipes running from here throughout the castle to deliver the wine in a fantastic system that kept the party going nonstop. It was built in 1751, but after a few decades, actually it began to crack. And so they emptied it out of all the wine and they kept it instead as a showpiece. Portcullis was the castle jester who loved to drink wine. This legendary dwarf was a castle entertainer, also in charge of the wine, where he reputedly drank 5 to 8 gallons of wine a day. When asked if he wants another glass of wine, he'd always say, "Perché no?" or "Why not?" giving rise to his nickname, Portcullis. According to legend, he lived happily into his 80s, having never drunk anything in his life except for wine. But when he took ill as an old man, the town doctor had him drink water. He died the next day. While you're down here in the cellar, you'll find some other interesting activities, including a wine bar and another big barrel. In fact, that's the first barrel that you're going to see when you come in the entrance. But don't be fooled, this is not nearly as large as the big one that we've just been visiting. So be sure to get to the real thing while you're down here. In addition to these huge barrels, there was 3 times as much wine stored elsewhere in the castle for a grand total of 1 million bottles. That fueled a steady stream of guzzling, which reportedly averaged 2,000 liters every day. Appropriately, there's a nice wine tasting bar available down here in the cellar for you to sample various German red and white varieties at a reasonable price. This country is famous for beer, but modern Germans are more likely to drink wine. When you finish with the cellar, walk up the ramp and take a turn to go out onto another viewing terrace. There's no real sign that points the way out to this terrace. It's just the passageway that you go through to get out here. This gives you yet another perspective looking down on the town and the river and the bridge down below. It's really a grand vista, and you can look back up at the wall of the castle itself. You might even see some wedding photography going on up here. It's a very picturesque spot. You'll be snapping lots of pictures out here on the terrace. It does give you a slightly different view than the first terrace that you were looking out from. So it's a nice vantage. You want to get yourself in the picture, prop your camera up on your elbow so you get a good steady shot of the distant landscapes. There's a very impressive residential neighborhood on the other side of the Neckar River with some huge houses. Probably many of them have been divided up into smaller apartments by now. Looking down into the old town, you'll see the Heilig Geist Church right on the market square. Take proper time here to soak it all in. It's quite a grand view. And then moving along to the next castle highlight.
Your basic ticket to the castle includes a visit to the German Pharmacy Museum, which has several basement galleries covering the history of medicine and pharmaceuticals. Now, this is a lot more interesting than it sounds. First of all, you're entering into the basement of a beautiful structure, so just the architecture of the rooms themselves is worthwhile, and then the contents is really a bonus.
Also called the Apothecary Museum, it gives you a fine idea of how medicine was practiced back in the 1700s. You see all of these different potions and the instruments that were used to create them, and the stock shelves for selling and storing them. You'll be surprised how large and captivating the exhibit is, with 20,000 objects representing the history of pharmacy. The floor plan shows the many galleries, each with their own theme. They say it's the largest and finest such collection in existence, spanning 2,000 years of pharmacy history. The ancient chemist was able to boil and evaporate the essential elements of a compound using a still, and then condense them into a concentrated and effective medicine. This process is still used today in manufacturing our own pharmaceuticals, with slightly more modern factory-style equipment, of course. Be sure to walk down that staircase to the lower level to enjoy this large collection of stills. After completing your visit to the castle grounds, you want to have a look at the castle gardens. But before leaving the castle, why not take a little time to look around once again at these magnificent buildings and just consider their history. Castles like this were powerful sanctuaries in the Middle Ages. Back then, they did not have unified governments or a country that protected each town. It was the feudal system where each town was on its own, almost functioning as a city-state. And so these castles were critically important to safety, security, and protection of the ruling class. But then later, when they were attacked by the large cannonballs introduced in the 16th and 17th century, the mighty walls could be blasted to dust. The Heidelberg Castle was occupied by various members of the local royalty for 3 centuries, until its destruction by French invaders and lightning strikes in the late 17th century, when it was abandoned. By the early 19th century, it was a total ruin and in danger of being completely pulled down. But preservationists got busy and began reconstruction, which continued right on up through the 20th century, producing this grand structure, which is one of the finest examples of a castle anywhere in Europe. It ranks right up there with other great castles such as Salzburg, Edinburgh, Prague, Segovia, or Windsor. But this one has the best location, perched magnificently over the old town. And when you're done with your visit to the castle itself, you exit back out through the watchtower, cross the bridge over the moat, and into the gardens.
You don't want to leave the castle without taking a good stroll through these vast green terraces, which have quite a history of their own. And there's no charge for the garden, so if you're pinching pennies, you could enjoy much of this experience for free.
It's a level promenade and offers some additional views of the castle. This large tower was used to store barrels of gunpowder, and unfortunately, it blew up in 1669 when the French attacked it. Mark Twain was impressed by it during his visit and described it saying, "This old tower is split down the middle, and one half has tumbled aside in a picturesque attitude. The standing half exposes its arched and cavernous rooms like open, toothless mouths. Misfortune has done for this old tower what it has done for the human character sometimes, improved it." The castle garden was originally a rocky gully that provided a natural barrier defending the castle's flank, until King Frederick V decided to fill in the chasm and create an elaborate garden complete with statues, fountains, flower beds, fish ponds, and other sensual delights. It developed a miraculous reputation as the 8th wonder of the world, but ironically, invading armies later used the level gardens as a convenient avenue to attack the castle. There are several lovely fountains scattered through the gardens, especially at the back edge where a voluptuous river god lounges in a grotto. You'll want to walk to the far end of the castle garden to get some excellent views of the town and the river and the castle from different angles than you have seen previously. You'll get a lovely perspective on the old bridge and the Neckar River down below. Later, you could take that 1-hour river cruise. You might be surprised to see there are some vineyards up on the hill. Yeah, they make their own wine. If you are out in the garden for these views, you can then take a shortcut back into town by simply walking down a lovely footpath. You could instead take the 5-minute funicular ride back down, like nearly all visitors. It's included in the price of your ticket, but you'll find it's faster and more fun to walk down. The entrance to the path has no sign, but you'll see it. Notice how it would be the same distance to walk down compared to walking back over to the funicular. It's only about 400 meters either way. Then if you go to the funicular, you've got to wait for the ride. Sometimes there's a line, and that takes time. The stroll down is not only faster, it gives you a pleasant, scenic alternative experience. The footpath takes a very gentle slope, so it's easy to walk it, especially if you can get into one of those downhill rhythms where you sort of float along. You'll have a lush garden view on one side of the path and the castle looming overhead on the other side. The walk down takes just 10 minutes, and that completes your visit to the castle. On the other hand, if you're feeling more adventurous and have some time, you could ride the funicular to the very top of this mountain at 1,600 feet, way above the castle, where there's a small amusement park, snack bar for lunch, and an observation tower that offers a view over the surrounding countryside. And then you can ride back down on the funicular back to town. But maybe leave that trip up to Königstuhl for another visit. We've got many more movies about Heidelberg you can find in our collection. And if you enjoyed the movie, how about a thumbs up? And we always welcome comments down below. We upload a new movie every week, so please subscribe to our channel and be sure to click that little alarm bell. Then you'll be notified.